morning. You're listening to Central Wisconsin's 24-hour information station, AM 1320 WFHR. It's time now for the Morning Magazine, brought to you by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing. Now, with the Morning Magazine, here's Carl Hilke.
Thank you, Jerry, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's show on AM 1320 and streaming live at WFHR.com. We also welcome our friends from Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. Jesse's getting my better side for viewing either on their website or on your local public access cable channel. And the reason he's here is because for the entire hour, Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink will be here, and we'll be taking your questions at 715-424-2600. With that, we welcome the Mayor of Wisconsin Rapids, Zach Vruwink. Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning. Good morning to our listeners.
Okay, well, it was an interesting night in the council chambers, and I guess first off, we might as well talk about something. Whenever you talk about pocketbook, I've learned doing shows with mayors, pocketbook or service issues are the ones that people react the most. So let's talk about the change in the sewer ordinance, why it was adopted. There was the study, and it basically said residential, commercial, and public users were paying for wastewater treatment services at disproportionately higher amounts than contracted industrial users. So to fix that and also repair equipment, you're going to increase the share of revenue from industrial users and raise sewer fees across the board.
That's right. So we had suspected that we hadn't been accurately charging. I won't say accurately. We hadn't scientifically been charging our users, our wastewater users, and that includes industrial users, as you talked about, and those are the folks such as Ocean Spray, Mariani, the landfill. There's others that are industrial users, but those are the big industrial users, and then we have commercial users, which are our everyday businesses, and non-wet users, meaning the ones that don't discharge a lot of wastewater to us, and then obviously our residential rate payers, as well as the commercial rate payers, or the industrial like schools and such, the institutional rate payers, excuse me. And so what we had done is wanted to do a scientific review of what costs the most to treat, and those treatment costs should be borne by those users that are using the treatment centers, the cost centers at the treatment plant. So what this rate study did was clarify for us the cost to treat certain types of waste. So the waste that's being discharged from an industrial user is very different than it is from you or I or any other residential or even commercial user in the city. So this process was a rebalancing, I would call it, where the users that had been sending us the highest cost to treat waste will now be bearing more of the cost to treat that waste, and residential ratepayers will be bearing less of that cost, as well as the commercial ratepayers as well. So while there was a net increase in rates, the costs borne by those respective users will be based upon the type of waste they send us. So high strength waste, it's loaded with BODs, and obviously it takes more chemicals and more treatment processes to treat that waste, so it's more time and money at the treatment plant. So overall, there was a minor increase in residential ratepayers.
I see they're estimating about $3 a month.
That's right. And it still leaves us in the middle of the pack, I would say, within municipalities our size across the state. So while none of us want to pay more than we have to, one of the major parts that was included in this rate study was a very long-range view, a 30-year view of what it's going to take to ensure that we don't have major failures in our treatment collection system. So that's the pipe beneath the road, as well as the lift stations that go across the river and the pipe beneath the river. Because if we have major failures there and we haven't adequately saved for those replacements, we're going to be paying more for them. And so this will adequately create reserves for us to do those replacements at appropriate times. We do a number of sanitary sewer replacements every year when we do street reconstructions, but we're not doing enough of it. And so because of the age of our system and the type of material used at certain times in our city's existence and growth, we're going to need to start replacing much more of that on an annual basis than we are. So this will help us save for that, so ratepayers aren't paying much more down the road, and really just financial good management here.
Okay, so obviously, yeah, it's an old system, so you got to make replacements because you know how expensive it would be if you had an environmental disaster, and,
right.
and probably some other charges that would come into play with that. But one of the major ones, don't you have coming down the road fairly soon, is what to do with the lift station on the west side of the city.
That's correct.
And that goes across the river. That's one that's been talked about for a few years now.
Yeah, it's almost like walking into a museum to watch those pumps turn 24/7, 365 near the zoo at the old at the existing west side lift station. And so the plan there is to redesign that. The pumps are beyond, in some cases, beyond some of their service expected life. So there might be a question of living on borrowed time while they're functioning today. We're concerned about redundancy, that should there be a failure, the disaster plan isn't quick, right? You may start trucking things over the river to the treatment plant directly, but we need to make sure we're ready for that moment so we can flip the new system online. Not to mention the river crossing, the under riverbed crossing, which sends waste from the west side to the east side. So it's one thing to lift and to pump and to make sure that the product moves from the east side to the west. It's another thing to make sure that pipe as well doesn't have major failures. So while we cannot simply televise it, like we would do a lot of other sewer projects in the city where we stick a camera down and analyze the condition, because of the nature of that system and taking that offline and such, we'd have to actually send trucks across the river because you just can't tell people to stop consuming water and sending wastewater to the system. So we're analyzing a lot of that. We've got some preliminary designs of the West Side Lift Station, which is a $2 million project, as well as an under river crossing, which our plan at this time, or thinking at this time, is to run a redundant system. So that way, when there is a failure, or we can plan for a cutover to the new system at that point.
Okay. Any timeline of when this might be happening?
I don't have any timeline today. We're in the process of looking at the annual budget, which we can talk about later.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about.
There really isn't anything specific to that project, design and obviously some of the construction. But, having the sewer rate ordinance passed will now enable city staff to sort of assign some timelines to when that work might occur. We obviously have the sewer utility, which is what the rates that we assessed last night. That's what builds the revenue to afford these sanitary sewer projects. So no, there's been kind of a loose timeline established that we need to make sure that make this a priority in the next year or two. And
that ordinance was passed unanimously, so it goes into effect next month, which, as the council was told yesterday or last night, the ratepayers will see the change in their November.
That's right.
Billing statement. Okay. If you're just joining us on the Morning Magazine, welcome. We're doing our monthly visit with Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink. Another big thing, you passed 3 different resolutions keeping the ball moving when it comes to aquatics. Right. And all of them passed unanimously. You stated the city's intent to commit at least $5 million to a regional outdoor aquatics facility at Whitterfield. You had one to proceed with a request for proposals for aquatics facility design or design build services, which would also include splash pads at Mead and a site to be determined. And then we talked about pursuing capital pledges and donations.
That's right.
Okay, so a lot on the table to keep the ball moving. Now what happens next?
Well, really, it was a big package last night. We obviously wanted to make sure that at a special council meeting about a month ago, council said, yes, we want to pursue a regional outdoor facility at Witter, but we didn't actually have any intent to commit financing for it. Okay. So similar to the days when the county board approved the Justice Center but never committed to the financing, we wanted to make sure that this wasn't something that they wanted to do, but they didn't want to finance. So
right.
At this point, we wanted to make sure the council was committed to this, and as you said, they unanimously or wholeheartedly committed a minimum of $5 million to make this a reality. And why the minimum $5 million? $5 million will get the city a city scale type pool. Now, it won't serve a regional population like a regional aquatic center will, but at a minimum, we're committed to restoring outdoor public aquatics to residents. And so the second item there was to begin facility design. While we engaged an outdoor consultant to give us rough design or conceptual design, you can't build off of those designs. It's purely images on a piece of paper. There's no design schematics, and there's a lot of due diligence we have to do at the site yet. Kind of what's the material beneath the surface look like? What do we need to do in terms of soil prep and soil borings? That's one piece. The other piece there is, are there other alternatives to where a parking lot may be located or where features may be located within the facility? So our intent previously with the general scoping project was to see how we could incorporate the skate park, the tennis courts, the existing outdoor ice skating rink, as well as Witter Field, all in a vicinity without having a lot of conflict. So while we were able to achieve that understanding through the previous process, a construction or a design build firm, construction firm could never build something off of the images that we've just had them create and put down on a 1D sort of piece of paper basis. So the council again proceeded to initiate a request for proposals, which we'll put out to the general public and to firms looking that have expertise in designing these sorts of facilities. We hope that we'll be able to turn that fairly quickly here and then begin final design through the fall and have that wrapped up by late winter, not even into spring. We need something before spring. So at that point, we're going to involve residents in saying, okay, this is a type of slides we may want. These are the types of pool amenities we may want. We conceptually put out there what the facility could look like and what it may cost, but we don't really have the exact idea of what residents prefer. So we're going to have some resident engagement in that process, but we also, it's our intention to make this more than just a summer aquatics facility. It should, if it's going to be successful, we believe, serve residents in multi-seasons, that there may be a shelter facility that could be used in spring and fall or maybe even winter. There's sometimes many of our park facilities like Helen Zoo House are booked year round, or to the extent that they're possibly year round, used year round. There's some winter issues because it's not got some of the heat HVAC capabilities to let people in there through the winter months, but could this facility hold bookings throughout the year, which would be a revenue opportunity for the facility and ultimately enhance that area even more. So that'll be the design build phase. And then the third item, as you indicated, was the discussion around pursuing capital pledges and donations. Many of us have heard folks that say, hey, I'm willing to give $50 or I'm willing to donate more than that to make sure that kids and families and adults have a swim space in the summertime in Wisconsin Rapids. So what we wanted to do was to formally put out there that we are going to now be accepting donations. Residents can write a check directly to the city of Wisconsin Rapids and earmark it for aquatics, and it will be tax deductible that way. There may be also the possibility for us to open up accounts at various financial institutions to be able to accept donations on our behalf, so they're not necessarily having to show up at City Hall if people have banking relationships and it's easier for them that way. And the third way that we're thinking about doing this is there's a whole new space called crowdfunding. Right. And businesses have used crowdfunding to launch a new product. Communities now are using crowdfunding to support people when there's been a tragedy through GoFundMe pages. We would use this sort of crowdfunding to fund certain amenities within the facility. So if it's park benches or whether it's larger splash pad features or even slides, this may be an opportunity for community members actually to vote by using $1 or some of their own money to support certain features that they feel passionate about, including in a facility. So council last night approved that path, and so if folks are ready to make that contribution, they may do so today, but we will be having more on that as the design proceeds.
Witter Field's an interesting location because you got a baseball stadium there, and what used to be a football field and what's now an ice skating rink in the wintertime. So what's the idea of how this thing would take shape in that space?
If people were to look at an aerial image on Google Maps or something, or even go out to the site, the conceptual design that was proposed to us for an $8.5 million regional aquatics scale facility really fits within the footprint of that existing track. at Witter Field, so outside the baseball fence at Witter Field. And so there's some manipulation there we can do yet to take, to reconfigure it. But the intent was to retain all of the existing uses at Witter and not create new conflict, whether it's lack of parking or whether it's lack of access or safety hazards. I mean, our intent is to make sure that we're bearing in mind all of those uses when they're used. And obviously this will be a major magnet for folks to visit the facility.
Home run balls going over the...
Yeah, right. Well, the owners of the rafters are very excited because...
I was going to think they would be.
There will be some excavation and there may be some opportunity to create some lift in the outside the field fence to be able to view from viewing platforms and such. So their wheels are turning already about how they can participate in a regional aquatics facility, but yet enhance the Witter Field experience for our residents as well. So it's exciting to hear people's energy around this, and now that a decision has been made, folks can move on, and that's an exciting part.
Yeah, you mentioned if it's for a regional facility, we're talking a minimum $8 million plus in dollars. So the city has put down its $5 million.
Right.
Now it's time for everybody else to step up to the. I got a feeling that's not going to be a problem.
Well, I hope not. I mean, we that could really delay construction and possible opening. So our intent is to have it open for the summer of 2018, with the possibility that we could get a splash pad at Mead yet in 2017. But of course, there's some tight timelines that need to be met.
And our construction season.
Yeah, right. That's a whole other complexity.
Okay. Sure. Okay, we might as well talk about this because this is something you were asked about a few times since you've been mayor on this program, and it was debated for the second time, the proposed change in the ordinance to allow doggies in parks.
Yeah, and primarily the trails. Our intent, with this ordinance. So last night we had a second reading in consideration because it wasn't unanimous at the last meeting, allowing dogs in certain, this is leashed dogs, I would add, in certain public areas of the city. And we had heard, obviously, you mentioned on our radio show, but I'd gotten letters from residents often and seen many residents as a user of the trail myself use the trails with their furry friends. Yeah. And obviously the responsible ones are the ones that we want using the trails, and if they're responsible, I think their tax dollars support these things, and so the council felt, as did I, that there could be a space for pet owners, dog owners, and non-dog owners to use the space at the same time. So last night there was more discussion than maybe needed to be done, just because I think there was a confusion around advancing the ordinance but wanting to make changes to it. So after all of that, probably 15 minutes of back and forth with many comments from alderpersons on this subject and people's interpretation and debate about which park shouldn't and should, the original published version that we had in our packets passed the council. And in effect, the gist of it is there's all the trails will allow pets to be leashed, dogs to be leashed within 10 feet of the trail to allow them to do their business, but yet to be able to use the trail throughout the 25 or so miles we have in the city. And then there are the modifications, I guess, if you will, in certain parks where there are playgrounds to remind folks that there are no pets to be allowed in the playground areas, and then some parks that have kind of less playground and family play to allow dogs as well. And so that passed the council last night, and so as soon as the ordinance is published, then it will be formally in effect. Could
you see, maybe kennel clubs or various, or the Humane Society putting up little posts or something where you got doggy bags?
Yeah. In fact, the Park and Rec Commission did talk about this when we first talked about the ordinance over a year ago, and committed to acquiring a certain number of pet waste containers, with doggy bags along the trails in particular.
Because I've seen it in other communities.
Promote good behavior, right? And there's no excuse if you've got a pet waste container and you've got a doggy bag on your way on the path, you should be taking care of that after your pet.
Okay. So, pet lovers, you and your furry friends can now use our beautiful trail system here in Wisconsin Rapids. Okay, I went through some of my highlights. Any other highlights that you wanted to talk about personally?
Yeah, we've talked about. There was a presentation by the CEO of the YMCA.
Yes, a very good presentation.
On the summer youth day camp program, and there's a nice video that was created, and I believe that'll be available on YouTube and wherever anyone else may want to see it. But because of the closing of Mead Pool, council members were very concerned about lack of opportunities for youth in the community. So the YMCA and actually Mead School principal put together a proposal to the council last spring, and this is the first time the city had ever done anything like this. And so it essentially was what they called an urban day camp, or summer day camp. So kids were either going to be spending time at the YMCA in Port Edwards and have access to the facilities and to the pool and the park facilities there, or they were going to be able to go to Camp Alexander and spend a week out at camp. And it might have been an overnight or it might have been on a daily basis. So we wanted to hear about how that went, and because it was the first time again that we had done anything like that.
And we've had Brett on. In fact, prior to the council meeting, we've had our last YMCA update. He was here, and we talked. He gave a similar type presentation to our radio audience about the success of that program. Yeah. And during the summer, we were getting regular updates about. The kids were really loving it.
Yeah.
And you saw that in that video last night.
So the result of it, while we committed up to $60,000, which would have been almost what we had in the fund to operate Mead Pool this year, it was really on a per-use basis that we would have been on the hook, essentially, for that. So we provided transportation to transport kids out to the camp or out to the Port Edwards YMCA. And primarily the age span was about 6 to 11 years old, with most of them being about 8. There was a subsidy built into the mix that if folks could demonstrate via free and reduced lunch validation, they would be provided a subsidized access. And 75% of those participants were on the higher subsidy, and 25% did not utilize subsidy. 99% of those kids were from Mead, which is something we suspected, but we wanted to make sure any youth in the community or in the city could take advantage of it. And it really only utilized 26% of its capacity. So they pointed to the fact that awareness and starting earlier and all of that would have been to their benefit. So ultimately, it only was a cost to the city of $16,000. So by and large, I think it achieved some success. I do think they learned a lot because it was the first of its kind for a partnership of that sort. There were 2 testimonials Brett left with us, and one was from a grandparent of this Michaela, who was 9, and she went to camp every day she could this summer. Because of affordability, they weren't able to enroll in any of the summer activities, and so this was the first of that kind. She had never had swim lessons before, so she was able to learn water safety skills out at Lake Nepco, and and they signed her up for the swim lessons that started this fall. So by and large, the kids that took advantage of it, I think really enjoyed it.
Is this something we're going to be doing next year?
All budget dependent, I think. I'm not certain, if it'll be a financial obligation of the city or if we'll solicit other donor support for it, especially because of the lessons we've learned and who is served and all of that. There might be others that we may seek for support. The principal of Mead School, Margie Dorhorst, indicated that she is able to validate and see the connections kids had that participated, which I think is a neat thing, because think about it, these kids may or may not have had any engagement over the summer months, and now they've been engaged with their peers, maybe built friendships, and will likely be more successful in the schoolhouse during the school year. Now, there's a lot more that goes into that, and obviously more environmental concerns with folks and the environments they come from. But I do believe that there has been success through this, and certainly lessons learned.
We have to take our first break this morning, but the phone lines are open for your comments or concerns with Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink. 715-424-2600 will get you on the air. You're listening to The Morning Magazine on AM 1320 and streaming live at WFHR.com. We also welcome our friends from Wisconsin Rapids Community Media.
Good morning and welcome back to The Morning Magazine, presented by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing. It's time for part 2. Once again, here's Carl Hilke.
Thanks, Jerry, and welcome back, everybody, to today's show on AM 1320 and WFHR.com, as well as Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. And you can view Wisconsin Rapids Community Media on their website. Is it still the same web address, RCCA?
You can get there from RCCA, I believe.
Okay.
There's a new one.
But it's also changing to WisconsinRapidsCommunityMedia.com.
Okay, WisconsinRapidsCommunityMedia.com, according to Jesse.
That's
okay,
correct.
so, and that's a really great website because you can see all the different programs and videos, and you can just click on it and you can watch at home in high definition or view it on your favorite cable system. Okay, I was just thinking about this with this weather system, and we've been getting a lot of rain. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't too long ago, everybody remembers the flood of the century that hit our area, and it was after a similar type of series of storms. Mm-hmm. And we had storm after storm after storm, and all of a sudden there was a deluge from up north.
Yeah, it was September.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so having gone through that, and with this kind of weather forecast, I know folks who suffered through that are going, oh no, here we go again. Yeah. So are we better able to cope with this kind of a storm system?
The one thing that we're collectively, and this includes city administration and emergency responders and public safety folks, as well as the county folks, much more in tune to earlier indicators. So when we have flow information from any of the Wisconsin Valley Improvement Corporation dam operators, so any of the dams between here, along the whole Wisconsin River, for example, when you've got flow data that indicates, and it changes so rapidly.
Right.
What that flow data means, however, has been a little bit up to some interpretation by folks, because while we had some of the same or similar flows, we didn't actually have some of the same or similar impacts. But of course, we've made improvements. We've been prepared earlier for certain things. So I would say, but from a residential reminder, folks should really subscribe to Nixle. And Nixle's been a great tool for us. You can get it on the Wood County Dispatch, probably on the county website. We've got a link to it on the city police department page. But folks can subscribe to Nixle, and that's a text alert system for us to text anybody about what they should be prepared for.
And you don't need a smartphone you say, hey, listen, all I have is a flip phone. That's fine. If you can get a text, you can get a Nixle alert.
As well as an email, or there's also their Facebook page. There's a whole host of ways people can get that information. But I would say we're much more prepared in the sense that we know we have indicators of when we need to be making certain things happen. But again, you want to be overly prepared sometimes because you don't want to have disaster strike and folks weren't prepared or weren't aware of what's going on.
I was just thinking, because this is, late September, and we're having these series of thunderstorms roaring through. And this storm system, they mentioned Marathon, Portage, and Wood Counties as the target area for the heaviest rainfall. And I'm going, deja vu.
Yeah,
or as Yogi Berra used to say, deja vu all over again. Mm-hmm. So I was just curious. So we've learned, and we know now what kind of data to watch, and what to be aware of. And if we see a fluctuation here, okay, hey, send the word down to whatever the protocol is, so that everybody knows what's coming up.
Because the dam operators have to communicate with themselves, or you have dam failures. So not often had they been maybe making sure that others were receiving the messages that they were sending downriver. So I think that was something that all of the companies have worked well together, at least in the last operation. A lot of communication back and forth, and everyone was informed.
Okay. Yeah, if the phone lines are open, folks, 715-424-2600. Perhaps you have some suggestions for aquatics or some other issue that you would like to make the mayor aware of. Hey, it was because of phone calls of the pet owners who said, hey, why can't I take my dog on the trail, that resulted in a change in an ordinance? So this is kind of a listening session. It's your opportunity to respectfully say, Your Honor, here's a suggestion, and that's what we're here for. You mentioned it's budget time.
Yeah.
That's fun time of the year.
That is. Mm-hmm.
Okay. What are we looking? We're hearing all sorts of things from the governor's accelerating the development of the state budget, it looks like, from transportation issues to whatever. What are you hearing about how it's going to affect municipalities, specifically cities like Wisconsin Rapids?
Well, actually, I'll note on the governor's proposal on transportation, because it's something that I believe politically it was the right thing for him to do to respond saying, hey, here's what we're thinking on transportation, because there has been a mounting pressure from business groups, from the League of Wisconsin Municipalities to the Counties Association to everyone in between that have all said we need to just fix transportation. We know it's something we rely on, business relies on it, industry relies on it, but everybody's lives depends on a good transportation system, and it needs to be funded. You can't just simply borrow and never have remedy. So one of the couple of the items worth noting, and it's so early in the budget process on the state level in particular, but the governor did advocate through his secretary's request growth in general transportation aids. That's the aids that trickle down to cities and counties and villages to maintain their local road system. So in that, there was a minor uptick in that. So any increase is welcome news. Of course, we'd like more, but we'll take what at least the governor is willing to propose. The legislature obviously will have its crack at it, and will leadership, et cetera, in the legislature as they go through the budget process over the next year. Excuse me. So the good news is they're calling for an increase in transportation aids to cities and villages, and we hope that is maintained or maybe even expanded upon before the budget is ultimately proposed through the state.
Okay.
On the local, go ahead.
Okay, well, I wanted to catch you there because this is one instance where they don't know that they're even showing bipartisanship, but I've heard both Representative Krug on the Republican side, Representative Shanklin on the Democratic side on this program say, yeah, a lot of the issues now don't go along party lines or philosophical lines. They go on urban, i.e. southern and southeastern Wisconsin versus rural Wisconsin, the rest of the state. That seems to be, and transportation is one of those things where, hey, what about us? Everything's going down to southern and southeastern Wisconsin.
That's right. And where is business? Where is industry? It's largely concentrated in the urban communities, Wisconsin Rapids being more of a rural, urbanized community, but nonetheless, having a major urbanized infrastructure. When we're talking about wastewater, of course, it's very urbanized. We've got all of the elements of infrastructure here that constitute an urban or a city. So I think we're going to continue to accelerate our message because we've got major transportation systems, whether it's 8th Street or the Expressway, all very, very much to a point where we've maintained them so well that we question whether or not the DOT is going to assign a timeline for reconstruction to them. So you'll see a shift or a pivot in our maintenance of certain roadways in the city, particularly taking effect in the 2017 budget, where we're going to take monies that we had allocated to constant doing pavement patching and the large depth patching we do on 8th Street and prioritize it to 34 North, as we did see this fall. And we've done some on West Grand. Obviously, there's not a whole lot we can do other than far out west. And then anything on the expressway system. So why we would pivot is because the DOT has this strange way of viewing things and saying, if the locals are maintaining it, we will not rebuild it. So we all know the age of 8th Street. We all know it's a terrible, it's not something that would be built today in its current form. So therefore, you will see a pivot in our budget request to the council that in my executive budget, and it has been reflected in the public works request in our pivot of maintenance dollars and where those dollars go. We've got a lot of local roads that need those investments as well, and so we're gonna prioritize that.
With regards to 8th Street, that is so tied into the so-called bypass issue, too. One of the reasons why 8th Street is so beat up, you got so much through traffic that is going on a corridor that's designed to be a 4-lane urban or shopping kind of district, but you got trucks roaring through there, and I mean, I see some big loads going down 8th Street South, and that takes up, hurts the roads, et cetera, et cetera.
It's a beating, that's for sure.
Yeah, is that going to be a key strategy there, trying to resolve what we've been talking about for years now?
Well, I do think ultimately it'll become a package approach. The DOT will recognize that while they may not want to build it to the standard that they built 54 from Home Depot to Baker, let's say, but they may build a narrower cross section, maybe a 2-lane cross section to force a lot of that through traffic and truck traffic east of 8th Street. So it's not barreling down 8th Street and you've got conflict between local users and the through traffic, and not to mention the freight that's moved across that system. So we have no reason to believe that they're willing to move on prioritizing any piece of the bypass, even if it were a first phase of it. We've been talking to state legislators now. Not to say our state legislator isn't in favor of it. It's the folks in Madison and the administration. I mean, the secretary of the DOT told me flat out it's not a priority for us. So that means it's a non-starter.
Right.
It's not going any further. So I do think. As time passes, we've had some conversation with the DOT even as of earlier this year, and that's where we gleaned from them that we've been maintaining it too well. I mean, again, it's a horrible thought process because here we're trying to protect an asset. Excuse me, but if it's going to delay our ultimate reconstruction and what's in the best interest of our residents, the taxpayers need to stand up and say, well, what's in the best interest of the taxpayer here?
Okay. We're going to take a quick break so you can get some water and get
you.
Yeah, okay. You're listening to The Morning Magazine on AM 1320 and streaming live at WFHR.com. Welcome back to The Morning Magazine. Today we've been visiting with Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink, and no one's called so far, which is kind of surprising. But if you want to call, 715-424-2600 is the number to call. And if you want to get on over the back fence, that's after 11:06. Okay, since I do both shows, I can do that. But okay, we've done a good job of maintaining 8th Street. So what's the long-term strategy with 8th Street then? What's going to happen?
We'll do essential maintenance on the corridor, which means if there's blow-ups, like we get in the summertime because of the heat, we'll do those repairs. But anything major, the next layer of treatment may be an overlay. You see that on major roads where before they reconstruct them on like the interstate system, they'll put in an asphalt overlay over the concrete, and then they'll do a reconstruction at some point after that.
Okay, we got our first caller of the morning, and with that, you can our quality equipment here. There you go. Yep. We can get those headsets on, and you can visit with our first caller. Good morning. You're on the Morning Magazine.
Yes, I'd like the mayor to talk about the airport, and specifically with the town of Rome. I know, Carl, you've had the folks from the town of Rome on, and how important they consider this airport to bringing in a lot of the folks that are going to, they're investors and whatnot, that are going to play that course down there, Sand Valley course, and how the town of Rome, if this is that important, that they could join the airport commission, be one of the members, and put some money toward in improving the airport or hangars or whatnot there.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Well, thanks for the call. So the status of the Rome participation in the Southwood County Airport Alexander Field is presently they've been approached based on the uptick in traffic that's as a result directly of their development in the town or in Adams County in the town of Rome is the Sand Valley Golf Course. And so the town of Rome has been approached to contribute to a capital improvement fund, and that so there's really two paths in which anybody could support the airport. It could be a direct contribution to support something directly, like capital investment, whether it's development of hangars or growth in runway, taxiways, whatever. Building improvements, etc. And the other path is to come into the airport as an owner. And presently there are 4 owners: Rapids, Grand Rapids, Nakusa, and Port Edwards. And so at this point, we've approached Rome with an offer to contribute to a capital improvement fund. Should we become adequately ready for any new, very large jet traffic that we've experienced even the last number of weeks since they've opened up preview play on the course and projected into the future, we need certain improvements and amenities. We purchased a de-icing cart that should preview play go into later in the year and the jet needs to de-ice, we previously didn't have that service available through the commission. So we purchased from Century Insurance in Stevens Point, which decommissioned its de-icing cart and so made that purchase. So ideally, a capital improvements fund would be created to pay for some of these capital improvements. The municipalities contribute to the operations of the airport, the utilities, the staffing, the snow plowing, and everything else that's necessary to operate the airport. But we don't have a major capital improvements reserve fund built. So the idea with the Rome participation would be that they would contribute to capital purchases that may be supported by other municipalities as well, but that they could directly support because reasons we're purchasing de-icing, or we may purchase a fuel truck, or we may purchase any other the ground power units and such, is primarily attributed to their traffic that's being designated down there.
What's their reaction been?
They're positively. In fact, we've got a proposal in front of their town board right now for them to contribute to what their 50% of what their full ownership contribution would be. So all the municipalities contribute based on equalized value. So all of the property valuation that's been equalized in each municipality is broken up by the budget. So we took their contribution, instead of offsetting or reducing any municipal contributions of the owners, any one of us, we asked them to contribute to this capital improvement fund. And it's been positive. I don't believe they've taken full action on it. I haven't heard if they've taken action, but we fully expect them to support the airport in some way.
Okay.
Yeah, well, okay, so the rest of us here that are support the airport, our tax dollars, we do it by equalized value. So how come the town of Rome, since this is so important to them, they don't want to get on board and do it that way also?
They are doing it via equalized value, but they're only contributing 50% of the equalized value. And I'm not sure budgetarily if they have the ability to support 100% of their equalized value contribution. Now, important to note, we're not allowing any, or at least the commission stance to date, has not been, and personally, I will not allow or support any new owner stepping into the picture with anything less than the full contribution that any one of us are contributing to. So they're, like Wood County, is only contributing a very small sliver of what their equalized value would be in the county. We're offering the opportunity to other municipalities, Town of Saratoga and the Village of Buren, to come in with some contribution to support economic development in the region, which ultimately, as existing taxpayers and supporters of the airport, will be to our benefit because we're broadening the pool of support based on, instead of coming to the well of the existing four owners, we've got more potential contributors.
What about going to maybe even some of the investors in the Sand Valley?
That's also on the radar. We've developed a capital plan. If we were going to go to the town of Rome, for example, what are the things we want to purchase? I've rattled off a couple of them here, but there's others, and those others could be sponsored by any industry or business for that matter. So the plan would be to approach any of those folks to solicit capital. Of course, the state is a major funder already of the airport through its entitlement dollars that are passed down through the Department of Transportation and through the Bureau of Aeronautics. And so we've been talking even with Representative Krug about opportunities for him to advocate for the airport. Now, I'm not sure discretionary dollars if there's a ton to be had, but we certainly can try.
Okay, we got another.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. We got another caller coming in. You're on the Morning Magazine with Mayor Vruwink.
Yes, I was just wondering if that shingle dump over on Bono was ever going to be cleaned up.
What are you talking? Be more specific, please.
Over on Bono, when they had all the tear-offs off the roofs, they have all those shingles piled up over there on Bono, and it's just been sitting there for a year.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the status of that is. I know I had mentioned that to the ordinance control officer, which if it's a public nuisance, which there questionably might be some nuisance there, that they may consider taking action. I'm not sure where that ended up.
Is that part of the landfill, or is it who's responsible?
I think his reference to it being a dump is that it's an eyesore.
Yeah, I know. Why did it end up there?
I think there was existing buildings there, and I'm not sure. I mean, they haven't been maintained, and
okay.
So I think it's been more of a storage. I thought Peterson Movers may have had some equipment there. I'm not sure where it stands.
Okay, so the building got dilapidated and
right.
Okay,
is that am I accurate in understanding where you're concerned?
Well, yeah, but I was thinking more of pollution. Like if it ever caught fire or something, that you'd have a real bad air pollution problem. plus a bill for the fire department to go over and put it out.
Yeah. Well, that's a good concern. I can put it in front of Ray again for his review, and maybe even the building inspector, which creates condemnation. And there's obviously a whole host of steps before that they can put them on notice to remedy some of the concerns.
Yeah.
Appreciate the call and the suggestion.
Yeah, thank you for the call.
Okay. Thank you very much.
But, I would think, let's get that thing cleaned up. I mean,
well, and some of it's kind of a questionable wetland back there. So I know from a redevelopment, we've thought, well, maybe the city's repurchase of the property from the armory, right? The National Guard folks that wanted to build the armory to the north here. Could that be a site for them? They've got Highway 34 and Highway 10 proximity. That might be a successful or a achievable place for them. But I know there's a lot of wetlands there.
Triangle Project.
Yeah.
The latest now.
So there was some action actually last
Yes.
night in the Finance Committee report. So the Triangle Project that the city's been acquiring and pursuing for redevelopment, we did accept a bid. We had 6 firms, I believe, that ended up putting in a bid for demolition and salvaging of the existing Good Time Charlie's
You had to be
property.
happy with that. 6 firms bid.
Yeah, and very competitive. We were told numbers that were way north of $200,000 to demolish and to salvage the property. We ended up selecting a bid for under $100,000. So
wow.
We're very happy about that. That is a grant eligible expense. The city received $150,000 from the State Economic Development Corporation to pay for environmental remediation, which includes tearing down the building and removing that from the site. So the good news is the state's going to be paying for part of that. The other piece to that is we got to remove lead and asbestos from the building. There's not a ton in there, about $6,000 of lead and asbestos removal. So at this point, the company can proceed. I haven't received a timeline from them.
Who is the company, by the way?
I don't have the name, I don't believe, in front of me, unless actually it's in the report. I can find it here. But the timeline for removal will be before December 15th. We've got to do some other environmental remediation, so we hope that they'll proceed with demolition and sooner rather than later to keep that.
Okay, but so now they got the right to begin the process of taking down.
That's right.
That building, and you're hoping to have it down before the end of the year.
Yes, correct. Actually, it's in this one right here.
Okay.
Easier to find. The company was Robinson Brothers, and I don't know if I've got where they're based, but we had a number of local firms involved in that, and we selected the most qualified and competitive at $99,500.
Okay, well, that's what happens when you get competitive bidding. You bring down the cost of a project.
And that was $500,000, $498,000, and the lowest bid, which we questioned because of their references and such, was $60,000. But yeah, the whole spectrum. The other piece to the development is we've now put out the request for qualifications. That's what we're calling an RFQ, and we've got that out to national, state, and local developers who would typically have done mixed-use developments like this in communities. And so our hope, we've got an early deadline of, like a preliminary deadline of October 31st on that, and then we'll review proposals after that. We'll still have a window for folks to submit until the end of the year. And so we really wanted to put that out there to see what the market was looking like for development for 2017. And so we've gotten questions and calls, but we haven't received anything to date. But we fully expect that once the building comes down and some of the other stuff materializes, some of the other pieces come
I
into
think
play.
once the building comes down, then you start seeing the folks that want to develop there going, hello, how do I get involved?
That's right, exactly. Yeah. And we need to put together our full incentive package. We've got a pretty good handle on what that'll look like, but as we proceed, obviously the county annex, we sure hope that the county board will take action pretty soon to convey the annex to us. We very much want to give them parking provided for them for the river block move, and I know I've been talking with Lance Plimmel on this, and I sure hope that the clock's ticking, right? You can only pave so late in the year, and they're not going to have paved parking lots if they're going to move in the middle of March next year, or even in late spring in the existing form at the Elks lot, and some other things are. So let's hope that they can make this happen.
Well, a very interesting hour this morning, Your Honor, and I thank you for your time. We'll do it again next month.
All right, Carl. Thanks to our listeners as well.
Okay, and that's going to do it for today's edition of the Morning Magazine here on AM 1320 and WFHR.com. We also thank Wisconsin Rapids Community Media.